The prosecutor husband returned from a business trip and brought gifts for everyone in the family. A silk scarf for the mother-in-law, a watch for the sister-in-law, and even a box of pastries for the nanny. Only not for me. Just this. Xia Huai looked at me with a cold face. You want a divorce just for this little thing? I helped him take off his coat, folded the suit that still held his body temperature, and said calmly, it's not just this. 4 years of marriage, 3 years of him actively seeking external assignments, saying that my low education didn't match him, an unplanned pregnancy and rushed marriage. The child wasn't saved. He said I wasn't careful enough. I gave up my manga dream to be a full-time housewife. He said I was ignorant and only knew how to spend money. I gripped the cuff of his suit. The texture of the wool fabric under my fingertips was delicate, carrying his usual cold woody scent, with a hint of travel dust. After 3 years of external assignments, he finally came back. My heart thumped dully in my chest, and I mustered all my courage. It's not just this. Xia Huai lowered his eyes, his gaze falling on my hand clutching his cuff. Devoid of any emotion, he had just showered and changed into a dark gray silk loungewear set. His figure elegant and upright, an invisible sense of alienation pushed me thousands of miles away. We stood in this huge study, only a step apart, but it felt like we were separated by mountains. He finally spoke, his voice cold and clear. Chen Su. This marriage was arranged between our families long ago. 4 years ago, you took the initiative to come to me, saying you were willing to marry. Hearing these words, my body involuntarily froze. Yes, I took the initiative, when the Shin family was at its most vulnerable. I grabbed him like grabbing the last straw. I subconsciously rubbed the fabric, a familiar stinging sensation coming from my fingertip. Those were the thin calluses left by holding a pen year after year, and the marks of being pricked by a needle and healed when I hand-sewed this suit to give him a surprise. He didn't know anything about these 4 years. Perhaps my overly pale face moved him for a moment. Xia Huai sighed almost imperceptibly. I was in a hurry on this business trip. Forgetting to bring you a gift was my oversight. There was a hint of something like comfort in his voice. I'll have Lin Nan order you the latest tomorrow, whichever brand you like. Just tell him. My heart sank suddenly. So, in his eyes, all my abnormalities tonight were just because I didn't receive a gift from his business trip. My throat was terribly sore. I wanted to explain, to tell him that I wasn't waiting for a gift, and I never cared about these things. But I opened my mouth and couldn't utter a single syllable. For years of silent marriage had exhausted my ability to speak. Xia Huai frowned slightly, revealing a hint of impatience. That kind of inadvertent irritability of a superior, which could easily crush me. It's late. Get some rest. I froze, not moving until the study door was gently closed by Xia Huai. That soft click was like a sluice gate, shutting all my emotions out. Back in the master bedroom, the huge double bed was clearly divided. I lay on the edge of the bed, my body tense. The air was filled with suppressed silence, broken only by the sound of our shallow breathing. The mattress next to me suddenly dipped. Xia Huai turned over, moving closer to me. The familiar scent of pine instantly enveloped me, invasively drilling into my nostrils. My body reacted faster than my brain, stiffening abruptly. My mother-in-law's pointed words from earlier that day exploded in my ears. Xiao Su, it's time for you two to have a child. A sharp, stabbing pain suddenly shot through my lower abdomen. Cold sweat instantly soaked my back. Instinctively, I curled up, my fingernails digging deep into my palm. An arm reached out, hovering above me. I closed my eyes, waiting for the impending 4-year-long routine. However, the expected wait did not come. Instead, with a snap, the last bit of light from the bedside lamp was extinguished. He retracted his hand, turned over, and re-established the distance between us. The suffocating scent of pine gradually faded. The tense muscles finally relaxed, and the sharp pain subsided. In the darkness, I breathed a long sigh of relief. A sense of deliverance. But what followed was an even more overwhelming sense of disappointment. I silently mocked myself in the darkness. Chinsu, what exactly are you expecting? Xia Huai, a born star. At 26, he passed the bar exam with the second highest score in the country. His future limitless. In the entire city of Jing, the eligible ladies who wanted to marry him could line up from the east side to the west. But in the end, he married me, an ordinary girl who was good for nothing except painting. I still remember that rainy day 4 years ago, clutching the thin lab report that read 6 weeks pregnant. I stood like a gambler in front of the Xia family's magnificent gates. Xia Huai listened to what I had to say and remained silent for 3 whole days. 3 days later, this usually proud man finally bowed his head to me. This source of trouble, he doesn't love me. I knew it from the first day of our marriage. For the past 4 years, I have been trembling with fear, trying to play the role of a perfect wife, hoping to make up for everything I have forced upon him, but it's all been in vain. I am sorry for him. I've always been in his debt. 7 in the morning, the sky barely light. Xia Huai returned from his morning run, his body carrying a light sheen of sweat and the crisp air of early spring. I took a clean towel from the cabinet in the entryway and handed it to him. It's cold outside. Go take a hot shower. My voice was calm. He took the towel, his movements pausing as he wiped his forehead. His deep eyes fell on me, his gaze sweeping over me inch by inch. I was wearing an old, faded sweatshirt, issued by the art studio when I was in college, the school emblem printed on the chest. The paint already mottled and cracked. His eyes turned cold, his thin lips pressed into a straight line. I won't be home for dinner tonight. I have a social engagement. He threw down the towel, turned, and headed for the bathroom. Without another word, I was already used to it. Bending down to pick up the towel that still held his body warmth, I prepared to take it to wash. The housekeeper, Fong Qingzhu, came out of the kitchen with breakfast, seeing the faint dark circles under my eyes. She lowered her voice with concern. Madam, you stayed up late painting again, didn't you? The master is back. Why don't you sleep a little longer? I turned back and made a shushing gesture to her. Qingzhu. Fong Qingzhu immediately understood and said no more. In the short walk to the study, a thought flashed through my mind. My footsteps abruptly stopped. I finally understood what that cold look in Xia Huai's eyes meant just now. He thought I deliberately dressed like this, protesting silently for the gift I didn't receive yesterday, using this method to demonstrate to him, to express my dissatisfaction. A pang of bitterness surged from the bottom of my heart. So, in his eyes, I am such a calculating, scheming person. Even more tragically, I understood him so well. I closed my eyes, forcibly suppressing the bitterness, and pushed open the door to the study. This was the only place in the entire Xia household where I could feel a moment of peace. I sat down and opened the household ledger. Shopping lists, water and electricity bills, social expenses, dense numbers and entries, clearly listing all the expenses of this family for the past 4 years. I held the pen, my fingertips resting on the cold surface of the paper, and my chaotic thoughts slowly settled down with each stroke. Only here, when dealing with these trivial but concrete matters, I am just myself. Just as I finished checking the last bill and was about to close the ledger, the intercom rang. It was Uncle Chen, the housekeeper, his voice as steady as ever. Madam, Mr. Lin Nan is here. Lin Nan, Xia Huai's chief assistant. My fingers tightened slightly around the receiver. Uncle Chen's voice continued to come through. He said Mr. Xie asked him to bring something over for you. I put down the receiver and sat quietly for a moment. Lin Nan. The name was like a pebble, rippling across the face of my newly calmed heart. I got up and walked out of the study. The atmosphere in the living room was somewhat stagnant. Lin Nan, in a well-tailored dark suit, stood in the entryway. His expression as professional and restrained as ever. He was holding a large shopping bag with a logo I didn't recognize. But that was obviously expensive. Fong Qingzhu and several other aunties stood to the side, eyes lowered, minds elsewhere, but unable to resist stealing glances from the corners of their eyes. In their eyes, there was sympathy, curiosity, and a hint of understanding. I walked over calmly. Assistant Lin. Thank you for your trouble. Lin Nan nodded slightly, handed over the shopping bag. His voice without a trace of emotion. Mr. Xie instructed me to say it's compensation for the madam. Compensation. A breath caught in my chest, stuck halfway. I didn't reach out to take it. Qingzhu. Take it. Fong Qingzhu stepped forward quickly, taking the heavy bag from Lin Nan's hand. And the moment her fingers touched the bag, I saw her shoulders shrink almost imperceptibly. Thank you, Assistant Lin. Take care. I issued the order to leave. Lin Nan didn't seem to want to linger either, and after a polite goodbye, he turned and left quickly. The door closed, cutting off the outside world. Fong Qingzhu held the bag, her face unable to hide her indignation. Madam, this. I raised my hand, stopping the words she was about to say. Put it in the back of the closet in the dressing room, where I won't see it. I instructed softly. Everyone dispersed. Only the housekeeper, Uncle Chen, remained. He closed the door to the study, the subservience of a housekeeper fading from his face, replaced by a grandfatherly gentleness. Madam. He handed me a document. What is this? I asked. A publishing house has taken a liking to your online comic series, Childhood Memories, and would like to sign a publishing contract with you. My hand froze in midair. A few seconds later, I let out a very soft, almost self-deprecating laugh. Turns out, there were people willing to listen to the unspoken things in my heart. Also, Uncle Chen's voice paused, as if carefully choosing his words. I asked a friend from my hometown to inquire, and there's hope that your younger brother, Xiao Mo, can be transferred back to Beijing within 6 months. Xiao Mo, back to Beijing. These 3 words struck like a thunderbolt, exploding in my mind. 4 years. For him, I married into the Xie family, abandoned my dreams, and trapped myself in this magnificent cage. I thought that for the rest of our lives, my brother and I would only be able to look at each other from afar. But now, Uncle Chen was telling me that he could come back. A huge, indescribable surge of joy and bitterness rushed to my heart, making my entire body tremble. In my mind, Uncle Chen's words transferred back to Beijing were still buzzing, shaking me to my core. The memories that I had been desperately suppressing in my heart for 4 years were like a dam bursting, instantly collapsing the carefully constructed barrier I had built. I seemed to see my father. He wasn't highly educated, but he was the most optimistic person I'd ever known. Always saying that people should live like sunflowers, always facing the sun. He raised my brother and me alone with his carpentry skills, and his rough hands could carve the most delicate wooden combs. I remembered him carrying a man covered in blood out of a car accident. That man was Xia Huai's father. The 2 families had a slight acquaintance because of this, which later became my only lifeline. The scene shifted. It was my father lying on a white hospital bed, never to wake up again. An accidental construction site collapse took him away, taking away the only light in our family. The sky had fallen. My brother was working in a factory in another city when his fingers were mangled by a machine, almost crippling him. My grandmother's health deteriorated day by day, and the medical expenses were like a mountain. Clutching that thin university diploma, I was met with obstacles everywhere in the capital. The paintings I was once so proud of were worthless in the face of survival. Despair was like a dark vortex, pulling me little by little into the abyss. Until one day, I found a business card in my father's old wallet with the Xie family's address printed on it. I made that call, using the meager favor my father had earned by risking his life to save someone, using my most precious 20s as a girl to exchange for a chance for my grandmother to live. This was a debt. The Xie family owed it to my father. Tears finally escaped my eyes, dripping onto the dark mahogany table. I bit my lip hard, not allowing myself to make a sound. But my throat was filled with the howling of a trapped beast. "Madam," Uncle Chen's voice sounded softly, with a hint of pity. "Actually, over the years, Mr. Xia has always asked me to have people keep an eye on Mr. Xiaomo's work." I suddenly looked up, my eyes blurred with tears. Looking at him, "He asked you to keep an eye on it?" "Yes." Uncle Chen handed over a tissue, his voice even lower. "Mr. is not good with words, but he has always kept your family's affairs in his heart." This opportunity for transfer was also made possible by him going through several layers of connections. My heart felt like it was being clenched by a hand, then slowly kneaded open. Sourness, grievance, and a hint of indescribable sweetness. So, the thing I exhausted all my strength to obtain, he had already been quietly working on. I took the tissue and wiped my face haphazardly, my voice hoarse. "Thank you, Uncle Chen." Uncle Chen sighed, looking at me with gentle eyes. "Madam, you are a good girl. In the future, live a good life with Mr. Be a good wife and mother, and you will become more and more successful." I lowered my head, looking at the mess of coffee stains on the table, the corners of my lips curving into a very slight arc. Successful? Perhaps. But my life shouldn't be limited to this one path. I had just cleaned up the table when Zhang Ma, from my mother-in-law Lu Ningxuang's side, came to invite me, saying that my mother-in-law had stewed some nourishing tonic. Lu Ningxuang's room was filled with a strong aroma of medicinal herbs. She scrutinized me for a moment, then pushed a dark, lacquer black bowl of soup in front of me. "Seeing that your complexion hasn't been good these past 2 days, I had the kitchen stew something. Drink it while it's hot to nourish your body." I took it and nodded obediently. "Thank you, Mom." She elegantly fiddled with the jade bracelet on her wrist, her voice neither too loud nor too soft. At Xia Huai's age, his friends' children are already running errands. Wang Yanzi's son even learned to say Papa in a video the other day. My fingers holding the spoon tightened slightly, the tips turning white. Sure enough, Lu Ningxuang sighed, her gaze drifting out the window, as if talking to herself, yet speaking for me to hear. If that incident hadn't happened back then, and Xia Huai had married Chu Lan, I'd probably be holding my grandson by now. Chu Lan. This name was like a tiny needle, always popping up inadvertently, pricking me. I lowered my eyes, silently drinking the bitter, astringent soup, my throat feeling like it was stuffed with cotton. In this family, I seemed to be forever an intruder, an accident that filled someone else's position. Back in the master bedroom, I finally felt alive again. I drew open the curtains, letting the light of the setting sun pour in unreservedly, falling on my painting table. Only here could I breathe freely for a short time. I spread out the painting paper, but hesitated to put brush to paper. Marrying into the Xie family was, in the eyes of outsiders, a great blessing. The family had proper values, treated me politely, and I should be content. But the warmth and coldness of a marriage are like drinking water. Each person knows it for themselves. I suddenly remembered when we first got married. This bedroom didn't have this painting table, Xia Huai's study was large, with excellent lighting, and an entire wall was filled with books. I once asked him cautiously if he could spare a small corner of the study for me to put my easel and paints. He was looking down at a document at the time. And when he heard this, he looked up. That was the first time I saw such a cold expression on his face. Like the calm surface of a lake instantly freezing into ice. He looked at me, his voice devoid of any warmth. The study is for work. Don't bring your things in there. My things. My paintings. My brushes. My 20+ years of life and dreams. In his eyes, were just things. From that day on, I never mentioned the word study again. I moved all my painting supplies into this master bedroom, carving out a small, pitiful territory for myself in the space that belonged to both of us. The light of the setting sun gradually turned dim and yellow. I picked up my brush, dipped it in ink, and was about to make a stroke. The voice of the nanny, Fong Qingzhu, came from downstairs, clearly penetrating this tranquility. "Madam, sir is back." The ink on the tip of my brush spread into an ugly blot on the rice paper. The door opened. Moist, humid air, carrying the clean lemongrass scent of shower gel, rushed towards me. Xia Huai was wearing a dark gray set of home clothes. His short hair still dripping water, droplets rolling down his sharp jawline and disappearing into his collar. He walked straight towards me. I subconsciously tensed my back. The fingers holding the paintbrush curled up. His shadow enveloped me and the painting on my table. A palm landed on my shoulder. The scorching temperature of his palm transmitted through the thin fabric. My whole body stiffened. "When did you learn to paint?" His voice, lazy from just coming out of the shower, fell beside my ear. His gaze, however, was fixed on my unfinished painting. It was an autumn mountain scene, and I had used a lot of ochre and gamboge to try to capture the feeling of the forest being dyed in layers by the setting sun. The colors are used well. He seemed to have discovered something new and curious, his tone carrying a hint of surprise. "You've put in a lot of effort these past few years of marriage." A wave of sadness washed over me, and my mood sank. Put in a lot of effort. In his eyes, my little bit of painting skill was just a pastime to pass the time after marriage, like Mother Lu Ning's flower arranging and tea ceremony. I didn't explain. I've gotten used to it these past 4 years. I just tugged at the corners of my mouth, showing a very faint smile, then lowered my head, pretending to continue tidying up my painting supplies. But the hand on my shoulder didn't move. Xia Huai's gaze shifted from the painting to my little world, forcibly crammed into a corner of the bedroom. Easels, paints, stacks of neatly arranged rice paper. Here it is cramped, crowded. As pathetic as my Noertobsto-blaced dreams. He seemed to recall something, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. "Why don't you?" His words stopped abruptly, hanging in the air. I didn't need to look up to imagine the expression on his face at that moment. Probably regret. Perhaps even a hint of embarrassment. He wanted to ask me why I didn't go to the study to paint. He remembered, though, that the study was a place I was explicitly forbidden to set foot in. This bedroom at least had this drawing table. I had once asked him hopefully, cautiously, if he could leave me a small corner by the window in the study. I didn't need much space, just enough to set up my easel. He was leaning against the headboard at the time, looking at a document, and when he heard this, he raised his eyes to look at me. That was the first time I saw that almost harsh indifference on his face. He looked at me, his voice devoid of any warmth. "The study is for work. Don't bring your things there." The air was still. The heat of the hand on my shoulder felt like a branding iron, scalding the flesh beneath my skin, causing it to constrict. The unfinished sentence hung between him and me, the awkward atmosphere spreading. After a long silence, Xia Huai withdrew his hand. He turned and paced twice in front of my small drawing table before stopping. I'm sorry. His voice was low, as if squeezed from his chest with difficulty. I was prejudiced back then. I held the paintbrush. My fingertips cold. Prejudice. Such a light word. But I clearly remembered how, on our wedding night, he used your things to describe my painting tools, which I cherished so dearly. The humiliation of being looked down upon, both as a person and for my dreams, was like a thorn that pierced my heart, and remained there for 4 years. Now, this thorn had been smoothed by my own hand and had melted into my flesh. Hearing his apology now didn't even bring the turmoil I had imagined. I didn't even feel a little aggrieved. I just found it somewhat laughable. Too late. I'll have Uncle Chin tidy up the study and move your painting tools into air. He looked at me, his eyes carrying a kind of charitable sincerity. The light is good, and there's plenty of space. I raised my eyes and looked at him quietly. The cold indifference from before was gone from his face, replaced by, I'm fine here. I opened my mouth softly, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. Just relax. Xia Huai's brow furrowed, seemingly surprised by my rejection. Do you have enough paint and paper? If not, I'll have Lin Nan buy some, the best quality. He was, once again, trying to compensate with material things. It was what he did best, and the only thing he knew how to do. What I have now is fine, I said perfunctorily. He was silent for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. Chinsu, from now on, just call me by my name. There it was again. And those designer bags are just material possessions. You don't need to take them to heart. He looked at me, his tone one of coaxing instruction, like a magnanimous teacher, guiding his dull student. I suddenly wanted to laugh. So, in his heart, I was still that shallow woman who would fuss over a bag. A study. I suppressed my laughter and nodded obediently. Okay. I understand. I was used to it. In these 4 years of marriage, I had long been accustomed to this unequal exchange. His gaze fell back on the comic draft on my desk. The page of Snowy Night. Well drawn. He sincerely praised it. And then, in a matter-of-fact tone, said, once it's finished, I'll collect the original. I didn't say anything. He didn't press me further but raised his hand to glance at his watch. It's getting late. Get some rest. He turned first and headed for the large bed. The overhead light in the bedroom had been turned off at some point, leaving only a dim yellow bedside lamp. The cedarwood incense he usually used wafted in the air. Ambiguous, yet oppressive. Xia Huai's breath came over me, carrying the cold scent of cedarwood, and the burning heat that was identical to his palms. My body tensed into a straight line. A soft sensation came from my lips, but I couldn't feel any warmth. My consciousness drifted away, back to that wedding night 4 years ago. An unfamiliar room. An unfamiliar him. No kisses. No foreplay. Only tearing pain and a cold command. Endure it. Afterward, he went straight to the bathroom, leaving me alone, like a dying fish thrown ashore, silently curled up on the huge bed. Now, his movements were much gentler, even with a hint of clumsy probing. But to me, there was no difference. It was like a dull knife being replaced with a slightly sharper one. But the pain of being cut was the same in essence. In a haze, I heard him speak in my ear. Chinsu, we should have a child. Not a suggestion, but a notification. I stared, eyes open, at the dim light and shadows on the ceiling, and didn't answer, including tonight. 4 years. 3 times. So that was the whole reason for his unusual behavior tonight. 6 in the morning. My biological clock woke me up on time. I opened my eyes. The sky was faintly light. Xia Huai beside me was still fast asleep. One of his arms was heavily draped across my waist. like a shackle I couldn't break free from. I moved slightly, and my body sent a familiar wave of soreness. But that sharp pain that had settled for 4 years had disappeared. I was stunned for a moment. It turned out that even my body had learned to be numb. I held my breath and carefully moved his arm away from me inch by inch, then quietly got out of bed. As soon as my legs touched the ground, they felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the bed, steadied myself, and then walked to the dressing room. When I came out after changing, the nanny, Fong Qingzhu, was already waiting at the door. When she saw me, a flash of heartache flickered in her eyes, and she lowered her voice. "Madam, you're up so early. Breakfast is ready." I nodded and went straight to my mother-in-law Lu Ningxuang's room. This was the rule. Every day's menu and schedule had to be reported to her first. Lu Ningxuang was tending to her precious orchids on the balcony, and didn't even turn her head when she heard my voice. "Has the guest list for this year's spring banquet been drawn up? Hurry up. Don't let it be as ridiculous as the first year, making people laugh." Her tone was flat, but it stung. I lowered my eyes and responded, "Yes." Lu Ningxuang finally turned around, scanned me up and down, and then looked back at her flowers, as if talking to herself, and as if telling me, in the blink of an eye, "It's been 4 years." My heart clenched. I looked up at her. There was only a slight sigh on her face about the passage of time. And then she frowned again. "Oh, right. The tea party with Mrs. Wang." She forgot. She had completely forgotten the promise she made to me 4 years ago. The promise that I used 4 years of youth and all my dignity to keep. A chill ran from the soles of my feet straight to the crown of my head. Fine. Ever since I left Lu Ningxuang's room, a chill had been lingering in my limbs all day. It wasn't until 8 in the evening that Xia Huai came out of the study. I had just finished tidying up the living room and was about to return to my room. He called out to me, already walking onto the balcony, "Come here for a moment." I walked over and saw him holding my sketchbook, flipping through it page by page. That was the only corner where I could breathe in the past 4 years. The flowers and plants on the balcony, the 4 seasons outside the window, the side profile of the nanny, Qingzhu, dozing off. My world was only this big. "Thank you for your hard work." He closed the book, handed it back to me, his tone unusually gentle. I took it, my fingertips brushing against his cool skin, and I instinctively recoiled. He didn't seem to notice, his gaze fixed on the city lights in the distance. As he continued, "You draw well, but..." He paused, as if carefully choosing his words. "The content is a bit limited. Chinsu, you can try drawing something broader, like the city, or the myriad aspects of human life." My heart sank. Something broader. I lowered my eyes, looking at the small world in the sketchbook. Isn't my city, my myriad aspects of human life, right here in this villa? I didn't answer, nor could I. He didn't seem to expect an answer from me, and changed the subject. "Wang Yanji is coming over later. Prepare some coffee." Wang Yanji, his closest college roommate, and the one who looked down on me the most. I nodded and turned to go into the kitchen. The aroma of coffee beans filled the small space, but I felt a little suffocated. Carrying the tray to the study door, I found it ajar, and I could hear Wang Yanzi's exaggerated complaints from inside. "Huaiga, you're really something. I heard Chu Lan got divorced recently and isn't doing so well. If you had just..." My steps were rooted to the spot. The edge of the tray in my hand dug painfully into my palm. There was a moment of silence inside, followed by Xia Huai's calm voice. "Marriage is a responsibility. Responsibility. Not feelings. Not love. Just 2 cold words." Wang Yanji scoffed, the contempt in his tone undisguised. "Responsibility. What can she give you? An ordinary art student. Can she help your career in the slightest? Look at Chu Lan's father. My breath hitched, and I almost lost my balance. I wanted to turn and leave, but my feet felt like they were made of lead. I wonder, in Xia Huai's heart, what exactly am I? Then, I heard his voice, clear and calm, like a judge reading out a verdict that has nothing to do with him. Her background is ordinary, but she does have a talent for painting. My heart, because of this sudden affirmation, trembled violently. Perhaps. But his next words were like a hammer, smashing the tiny hope that had just risen in me into pieces. It's just that her character is slightly flawed. After all, women, they are always a little vain. Women, they are always a little vain. Xia Huai's voice was indifferent. I held the tray. The coffee I had carefully prepared for him now weighed a ton. My knuckles turned white from the force. I didn't rush in to question him, nor did I lose my composure and smash the cup. I just staggered and turned around, back in the master bedroom, closing the door. I placed the tray on the table. The heat of the coffee diffused, blurring my vision. I looked at the face in the mirror, so pale it was devoid of any color, frighteningly unfamiliar. A breath stuck in my chest, suffocating me. I clutched my chest, gasping for breath. But all that entered my lungs was cold air. 4 years. I exchanged 4 years of my youth for a phrase. Flawed character. Vain. Tears finally rolled down uncontrollably, landing on the back of my hand. My life. The perseverance I was so proud of. The dignity I carefully maintained. At this moment, became a complete joke. Madam, what's wrong? The nanny, Qingzhu, pushed the door open and, seeing my appearance, was so shocked that she dropped the towel in her hand. She walked over quickly and gently touched my face. Heavens, why is it so cold? I grabbed her hand, my body trembling uncontrollably. At that moment, I suddenly woke up. I can't go on like this anymore. If I stay any longer, I will die here. The tears stopped abruptly. I raised my head, looked at Qingzhu, my voice hoarse but unusually calm. Qingzhu, help me get the file bag from the bottom of the bedside table. Qingzhu was stunned for a moment, but she did as I said. The craft paper file bag was a bit old. I took it out, placed it on the dressing table, smoothing out the wrinkles one by one. This was something I had prepared a year ago. I had naively thought that there would never be a day when I would need to use it. After an unknown amount of time, the doorknob turned, and Xia Huai walked in. He took off his suit jacket. And when he saw me still sitting there, his brow furrowed slightly. Why aren't you asleep yet? His tone was as aloof as ever. I didn't answer, but stood up and pushed the file folder in front of him. Xia Huai's gaze fell on the file folder, then shifted to my face. With a hint of scrutiny, he tore open the seal and pulled out the few pages inside. When he saw the 5 words divorce agreement, a crack finally appeared on his usually composed face. He suddenly looked up at me, his eyes as sharp as knives. Chinsu, what are you doing? I met his gaze. Those deep eyes that I had once been obsessed with, now filled with only coldness. I smiled, a very light, very faint smile. Then, I told him, word by word, clearly, let's get a divorce. My voice was very soft, but it was like a pebble thrown into the heart of a still lake, stirring up waves in the depths of his eyes. What nonsense are you spouting? Xia Huai's voice was as cold as ice. His aura of authority, accumulated over years in high positions, instantly enveloped the entire room. If it had been before, I would have probably been overwhelmed by this momentum and unable to breathe. But now, I simply calmly took back the agreement from his hand, flipped to the last page, and pointed to the name I had already signed. The handwriting was neat, The small regular script I had practiced for over 20 years. Chinsu. See. I've already signed my name. I even smiled at him. Just now. Xia Huai's gaze was fixed on that name, as if he wanted to burn a hole through it. He raised his eyes, and those deep pupils swirled with emotions I couldn't understand: shock, rage. When did you prepare this? His voice was very low, each word squeezed out as if from between clenched teeth. I met his gaze frankly. A year ago. Xia Huai's pupils contracted sharply. The air seemed to freeze. I lowered my eyes, my voice without a trace of emotion. 4 years ago, my father was seriously ill. Xiao Mo had an accident, and I was desperate. I was the one who actively sought you out. I know that I came between you and Chulan, making it impossible for you to be together. And you've always been unhappy about that. This agreement is an explanation I should have given you a long time ago. I thought these words would make him feel that I was sensible, that I was thinking of him, but Xia Huai acted as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. Explanation. He stepped closer, the shadow cast by his tall figure completely engulfing me. Chinsu, have you forgotten that I personally agreed to this marriage? Xia Huai, own up to what I've done. What makes you think I need you to explain yourself to me? He doesn't understand. He never will. For the past 4 years, I've been like a prisoner bearing original sin, cautiously trying to repay this favor with my obedience and consideration. Every time he came home late at night, every time he belittled my paintings, every time he laughed and talked with his friends but left me out in the cold, those tiny, dense thorns had already pierced my heart with countless holes. I thought I wasn't doing well enough. Until today. I realized that wasn't it. It's just that I'm simply not worthy. A fire seemed to ignite in my chest, burning me with pain. The grievances that had been accumulating for 4 years collapsed all my pretenses at this moment. Tears rolled down unexpectedly, blurring my vision instantly. Xia Huai. I choked, calling him by his full name for the first time, my voice trembling. I'm so tired, really tired. Xia Huai obviously didn't expect me to suddenly break down. He reached out his hand, as if wanting to touch me, but froze in midair. The anger and sharpness on his face faded, replaced by a rare helplessness and annoyance. Tired of what? He frowned, as if he had finally found the crux of the problem. Is it because there are too many things to do at home? They'll have Uncle Chen hire 2 more maids tomorrow. My heart sank suddenly. I looked at him in despair, slowly shaking my head. The annoyance in his eyes deepened, as if he had completely lost patience. Then what is it for? Just because I didn't bring you a gift today. He took out his wallet from his pocket, pulled out a black card, and handed it to me. Take this card. There's no limit. Buy whatever you like. Consider it my compensation to you. Compensation. So in his eyes, all my grievances, fatigue, and despair are just something that a gift, a bank card, can smooth over. Tears stopped instantly. When the heart dies, it won't hurt anymore. I looked at him, my eyes as calm as a pool of stagnant water. Xia Huai. The problem between us is not something that money can solve. If you're afraid of affecting your future, I can wait for you. We can go public whenever you feel it's convenient. If you still don't agree. I took a deep breath and uttered the words that I had already calculated countless times in my heart. I'll leave with nothing. Xia Huai's hand holding the black card froze in the air. He stared at me intently, for a long time. That gaze seemed to penetrate my flesh and see the soul within my bones. In the end, he said nothing. He simply slammed the black card onto the ground, turned around, and yanked the door open violently. Bang! The tremendous sound of the door slamming made the entire villa seem to shake. The huge rock that had been pressing on my heart for 4 years shattered suddenly at that moment. I exhaled a long, silent breath. A sense of lightness I had never felt before washing over me. The entrance door was not yet fully closed when my mother-in-law, Lu Ningxuang, came out upon hearing the noise. She was wearing an exquisite silk robe, and her face bore its usual look of elegance and fastidiousness. Her gaze swept over me and then fell on the glaring black card at my feet, and her brows immediately furrowed. "What are you causing a ruckus about so early in the morning? Upsetting Xia Huai like this?" I bent down, picked up the signed agreement, and calmly handed it to her. "Mom, we're getting divorced." Lu Ningxuang was stunned for half a second, then let out a snort, as if she had heard something out of this world. "Divorce? Chen Su, are you out of your mind? Without the Xia family, how will you live?" I looked at her, my eyes without a trace of emotion. "Mom, I'm thinking of Xia Huai. He's in a high position now, with a promising future. He really needs a wife with a higher education and a more prominent family background to help his career." I paused, my tone sincere. "A daughter-in-law like me, who has climbed so high, will only become a burden to him and make you lose face in the ladies' circle. It's better for everyone if I leave." Lu Ningxuang was rendered speechless by my words. She had always valued social status and appearances the most, and my words hit her where it hurt, leaving her unable to find a word of rebuttal. A cold figure had returned unnoticed and stood at the entrance of the living room. Xia Huai's face was even more somber than before, his gaze like an ice-cold blade, shooting straight at me. "Mom, go back to your room." His voice carried an undeniable command. Lu Ningxuang opened her mouth, but in the end, she didn't dare say anything more and turned to leave resentfully. The huge living room was left with only the two of us. Xia Huai walked over step by step and sat down on the sofa opposite me, a strong sense of oppression washing over me. He stared at me as if interrogating a criminal. "How do you plan to live without me?" He still had that superior attitude, convinced that I would not be able to survive without him. I smiled. "Xia Huai, I don't need any compensation from you. I have my own comic studio, which has been operating for a year and has a stable income." One watched his face freeze and continued. "My work is under contract with a very famous editor in the industry, and the royalties are enough for me to live a very good life." The air was deathly silent. I could clearly see Xia Huai's hand on his knee, his knuckles tightening inch by inch, finally clenching into a fist, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. The control he took pride in crumbled at that moment. I averted my gaze, softening my tone slightly. "Besides, Grandma is getting old, and I want to go back home to be with her." Mentioning family seemed to ease the tension in Xia Huai's jawline for a moment, a hint of regret flashing in his eyes. "Grandma's health. I should have brought her over sooner." His voice was a little hoarse, carrying a trace of belated remorse. I shook my head. "There's no need. Grandma is used to living in the old house and doesn't like the hustle and bustle of the city." Having said all this, I quietly looked at him, watching the shock, surprise, and confusion in his eyes. After a long while, he finally found his voice, each word sounding as if it were ground out from the depths of his throat. You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you?" Faced with his icy accusation, I didn't even lift an eyelid. "Yes." A single word, light as a feather, yet it landed on Xia Huai's heart like a heavy hammer. I saw his pupils constrict sharply, too lazy to argue with him further. I walked straight to the coffee table in the living room. "The handover won't take long." I laid out the folders I had prepared one by one, my voice steady and without a hint of emotion. "These are the warranty cards and manuals for all the appliances in the villa, sorted by brand and purchase date. These are the contact information and work schedules for the gardener, pool maintenance, and family doctor. This is your dry cleaner's membership card for all your suits." as well as prepaid cards for several of your favorite restaurants. Each item was organized clearly and concisely. These past 4 years, I haven't just been a canary wasting away in a studio. Xia Huai stared intently at the documents, his Adam's apple bobbing as he spoke with difficulty. All these years, you've worked hard. A consolation that was 4 years too late, but I no longer needed it. Ignoring him, I took out 3 other ledgers from my bag. Now, let's go over the finances. I opened the first book, which contained the household's daily expenses. The second book contained property management fees, utility bills, and social expenses. The third book contained the details of your personal account expenditures. Every expense was recorded clearly, with receipts attached. Butler Chen, who was standing to the side, was dumbfounded and couldn't help but whisper in admiration. "Madam, you are truly amazing." I turned to a certain page, my fingertip pausing. It was from the first year we were married, when I was scammed out of a large sum of money by a luxury goods because I didn't know the market prices. At that time, Xia Huai just glanced at me coldly. "If you can't even handle such a small matter, is your brain just for decoration?" From that day on, I started to study finance like crazy, reading all the relevant books. I pushed the account books in front of Xia Huai. 4 years. Total income of 13,270,000. Total expenditure of 11,080,000. Leaving a balance of 2,190,000. All in this card. You can ask a professional accountant to check it. If there's even a penny's difference. Enough. Xia Huai suddenly raised his hand, interrupting me, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. His hand was trembling. I looked up, staring straight into his eyes, which were suppressing anger. "What's wrong, Chief Prosecutor Xia? Are you afraid I've embezzled money from the Xia family? Or have you always thought that I, Chen Su, am just a woman who is greedy for vanity and would sell everything for money?" I stood up, no longer looking at him. I walked towards Uncle Chen and a few servants who were standing aside, their eyes red. "Uncle Chen, thank you for taking care of me all these years. Take care of yourselves in the future." Everyone spoke up to persuade me to stay, their voices filled with genuine reluctance. I smiled and shook my head, returned to the coffee table, and poured myself a glass of warm water. I raised the glass towards Xia Huai, whose face was pale. "This glass of water is in place of wine. Xia Huai, thank you for helping my brother arrange a job. I will remember this kindness." I drank the water in one gulp, and the glass was gently placed back on the table with a crisp sound. That sound was like a rest. "You have already signed the divorce agreement. I will have the lawyer submit it to the court as soon as possible." After saying that, I picked up my bag. Not giving him any chance to speak, I turned around, not looking at Xia Huai again. Sunlight streamed through the huge French windows, cut into bright spots by the Venetian blinds, and spread out under my feet, like a golden carpet leading to freedom. Step by step, I walked lightly and firmly. Just as my hand was about to touch the doorknob, there was a sudden muffled thud behind me. That sound was the heavy impact of knees against cold marble. I turned back in astonishment. A young nanny, the girl named Xiaolan, was kneeling directly in front of me. She looked up, her face full of tears, a mixture of gratitude and reluctance. "Madam," her voice was tearful, echoing in the empty living room. Thank you for lending me money 2 years ago for my mother's surgery. If it weren't for you, my mother, she would have been gone. We all know you are the best person. Please don't go." As she spoke, she cowed out heavily. Uncle Chen and the other servants also gathered around, each with red eyes, wanting to say something but holding back. It turned out that the kindness I thought had long been forgotten was still remembered by someone. A hard corner in my heart suddenly stung from the unexpected warmth, and my eyes instantly welled up with tears. I hurried over and helped Xiaolan up. Get up. It's all over. My voice was a little hoarse, but filled with unprecedented tenderness. I wiped away her tears and looked around at the people I had spent day and night with. From now on, take care of yourselves. I paused and added, and take care of Pudding for me. He's a picky eater and only eats imported cat food. Pudding is a stray cat I pick up 3 years ago, and the only warmth in this cold villa. My gaze swept across the crowd, and I saw Fong Qingzhu hiding in the shadows of the doorway, her shoulders shaking, biting her lip hard, trying not to cry. I smiled helplessly at her. I couldn't take her away, and I couldn't take Pudding away either. Everything here, in the end, didn't belong to me. Finally, my eyes fell back on that man. Xia Huai was still standing there, like a sculpture with its soul ripped out, his face filled with unfamiliar bewilderment and shock. He looked at me, at the servants who were crying for me, and the storm in his eyes seemed to be completely shattered in an instant, leaving only incomprehensible chaos. 4 years. This was the first time I felt I truly saw him clearly, not through the halo of a prosecutor, not through the identity of the Xia family's heir, just a pathetic man blinded by superiority and prejudice. I withdrew my gaze, without any further nostalgia, opened the door, and walked out without looking back. The taxi sped along the highway. Outside the window, towering skyscrapers were gradually replaced by rolling greenery. The city's hustle and bustle were left behind in the wind, and the air began to fill with the fragrance of earth and plants. I rolled down the car window, letting the humid wind blow against my cheeks, drying the last traces of tears, like a long nightmare that lasted for 4 years. I finally woke up. The car stopped in front of a small house with a yard in the suburbs. From afar, I saw a thin figure leaning against the yard gate, anxiously looking around on tiptoe. It was Grandma. I pushed open the car door and almost staggered towards her. Grandma. That cry shattered all the grievances and forbearance of the past 4 years. Grandma opened her arms and hugged me tightly into her thin but warm embrace, her old hands stroking my hair. It's good to be back. It's good to be back, Shushu. We're home. I buried my face in Grandma's sun-scented clothes, smelling the fragrance of the blooming gardenias in the yard, and listening to the barking of dogs in the distance. My heart finally settled. The weary bird had returned to its nest. The days back in the small house were like putting life, which had been soaked in disinfectant, back in the sun to dry. The yard wasn't large, but Grandma had cultivated it into a vibrant haven. In the corner, the old warehouse covered in ivy had been transformed into my art studio. Sunlight streamed through the large wooden framed windows, falling on the easel, and the air was filled with the scent of grass and damp earth. I no longer had to huddle in that cramped storage room at the Xia's house, capturing light and shadow through a small window. This afternoon, Grandma and I were tending to the flowers in the yard. She stopped beneath the pear tree in the center of the yard, her wrinkled hand gently stroking its rough trunk. Shushu. This tree, Grandma planted it the year you married into the Xia family. I was taken aback. Grandma's gaze was distant, as if she were seeing through this tree to the slender figure who had resolutely left 4 years ago. We have a saying in our hometown that the pear tree in the yard is watched over by the pear spirit. I made a deal with the pear spirit. Grandma smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes like dried orange peel. I used the piece of my old bones to exchange for my Shushu, for her to be safe and free. Year after year, my nose tingled, and tears fell without warning. So, in places I couldn't see, Grandma had been praying for me in her most simple way for 4 years. I threw myself into her arms, like a lost child finally finding home. Grandma, I'm so sorry. Grandma just patted my back, saying over and over, silly child, home is here. There's nothing to be sorry for. Dinner was simple but warm. A steamed perch, a plate of vibrant green stir-fried vegetables, and rice made from newly harvested grains, its fragrance filling the house as it steamed. Grandma and I sat under the warm yellow light. She put food on my plate, chattering on about plans for the empty space in the yard, saying she wanted to plant more roses and monthly roses. I looked at her, and the place in my heart that had been worn rough by 4 years of marriage was slowly filled with warmth. Here, I wasn't Mrs. Xia. Not a decoration who needed to maintain perfection at all times. I was just Shinshishu, the inspiration that had been imprisoned for 4 years, like a wild beast freed from its chains, galloped freely across the rice paper. My comic creation was no longer constrained. In the evening, I got into the habit of taking a walk in the nearby small park. The afterglow of the setting sun cast a gentle golden hue on the country paths, and the air was filled with the chirping of birds returning home and the fragrance of unknown flowers. My whole being relaxed, a lightness that came from the bottom of my heart. But as I strolled back to the door of the cottage, my footsteps suddenly stopped. A black luxury car, completely out of place, was parked in front of the yard, its sleek lines and expensive emblem, like a steel behemoth squatting in the countryside, seemed so out of sync with everything around it. It was Xia Huai's car. My heart sank. Before I could react, the door of the cottage opened. A familiar figure ran out cheerfully. It was Fong Qingzhu. Sister Shin, you're back. Her face was filled with undisguised joy, like a little sparrow seeing its owner. Seeing her, my tense nerves relaxed slightly, and a smile involuntarily spread across my face. However, the next second, the car door opened, and a tall figure stepped out from the driver's seat. Xia Huai. He was dressed in a well-tailored, dark gray casual suit, lacking his usual sharpness and possessing a touch more gentleness. He looked at me, his gaze devoid of the scrutiny and indifference of the past, even carrying a hint of anticipation I couldn't decipher. The smile on my face instantly vanished. I straightened my back, carefully concealing all my emotions, and gave him a slight nod. Mr. Xia. The voice was calm, distant, as polite as if addressing a stranger. The light in Xia Huai's eyes dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Fong Qingzhu looked at me, then at him, awkwardly rubbing her hands. Sister Shin, Grandma asked me to go in and help boil water. I'll go in first. After she finished speaking, she darted back into the house like a startled rabbit. At the courtyard entrance, only Xia Huai and I remained. The evening breeze carried the scent of grass from the fields, stirring the stray hairs on my forehead. I turned to the side, made a pleased gesture, my tone calm. Come in and sit. He silently followed behind me, his steps somewhat hesitant, as if surveying this rustic farmhouse that was so out of place for him. Upon entering the house, Grandma was sitting on a rattan chair, picking vegetables. Seeing Xia Huai, she merely lifted her eyelids, her hands not stopping their movements. Xia Huai stood before her, slightly bowing, his voice carrying a hint of imperceptible tension. Grandma, I'm sorry. These past few years, it was my oversight, failing to bring you home. Grandma tossed a picked green vegetable into the bamboo basket, not even raising her head. Mr. Xia is too polite. This old bone of mine isn't used to living in tall buildings. The address Mr. Xia instantly drew a line. Xia Huai's face paled a little more. I didn't speak. Turning to bring out 2 freshly brewed cups of tea from the kitchen. The tea leaves were wild tea picked from the mountains. As boiling water was poured, a coarse fragrance permeated the air. I pushed one of the cups towards him. Have a taste. It's nothing precious from the mountains. He picked up the teacup, took a sip, his brow seeming to relax slightly. It tastes very good, with a unique flavor. He put down the teacup, his gaze returning to my face. scrutinizing me. You look much better than when you were at home. As soon as he spoke, I suddenly couldn't help but laugh out loud. The laughter echoed in the quiet house, sounding particularly abrupt. Xia Huai was completely stunned, his face filled with bewilderment. I finally managed to stop laughing, wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, and looked at him. Mr. Xia, you probably don't know that in those 4 years in your family, I never laughed so heartily even once. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he took out an exquisite gift box from the paper bag he had brought, pushing it towards me. This is for you. It's getting cold. I didn't open it, only glanced at the gold-stamped logo. A silk scarf. Something like this again. I pushed the gift box back, my voice indifferent. No need, Mr. Xia. I never cared about these things before. In the Xia family, I always wore those few old clothes, not because I couldn't afford new ones, but because I paused, looking directly into his confused eyes. I didn't like having to become Mrs. Xia when I put on those clothes. Xia Huai's face completely stiffened. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he just managed to say, "Things are a mess at home now. Uncle Chin is getting old. The new nanny is disorganized. And my mom, she misses you a lot." He was trying to paint a picture that needed me to go back and save it. Everyone says the house can't function without you. I listened quietly. Is that so? I asked softly, picking up my teacup and blowing on the floating tea leaves. But I remember. It wasn't like this when I first entered the Xia household. The first time I tried to host a tea party, I broke your mother's favorite roux tea set. The guests were all whispering, and your mother's face was so dark it looked like it would drip water. My voice was very soft, but it was like an awl, chipping away at his heart. Where were you then? I was alone in the kitchen, helpless in front of the broken pieces. Uncle Chen secretly came in to help me clean up and comforted me for a long time. Where were you then? From that day on, I searched for and read every book on tea ceremony, flower arrangement, household management, and even the appraisal of precious porcelain available on the market. I wasn't born knowing how to deal with those wealthy ladies, nor was I born capable of managing a large family of dozens of people in an orderly manner. I raised my eyes, my gaze like an ice-cold knife, stabbing straight at him. I wasn't born knowing how. Xia Huai. I learned it the hard way, swallowing countless silent losses, swallowing my broken teeth and blood in the middle of the night. Before I managed to learn it, he abruptly turned his head away, avoiding my gaze, the line of his jaw tight. The room was deathly silent. I slowly stood up, walked to the door, and opened the wooden door. The pear tree in the courtyard rustled in the evening breeze. The tea is finished. The divorce agreement is very clear. We owe each other nothing. Mr. Xia, please go back. I thought that my resoluteness that day would be enough to make him flinch, but Xia Huai didn't. From then on, every weekend afternoon, he would appear punctually at the small courtyard's gate. He wouldn't knock, nor would he speak. He would only gently place some things on the stone steps at the door, then turn and leave. Sometimes it was imported low-sugar snacks for grandma. Sometimes it was the latest legal journals, with interesting cases marked in pencil on the title page. I looked at those things, but felt no ripple of emotion, only a sense of irony. Turns out, it wasn't that he was incapable of being considerate. It's just that this consideration had never belonged to me in the past 4 years. Until this day, what he brought wasn't just anything, but a heavy, original hardcover edition of a pictorial album about Song Dynasty flower and bird paintings. I was sitting in the courtyard, sketching a clump of newly bloomed hollyhocks when he stood quietly by the fence for a long time, watching. What are your thoughts on Emperor Huizong of Song's hibiscus and golden pheasant? He suddenly spoke, his voice gentle, like that of an old friend discussing scholarship. My brush paused, a little surprised. The colors are rich and gorgeous, elegant and luxurious. But the technique is too meticulous, lacking a bit of artistic flair. Then you appreciate Suzai's untamed style more. I raised my head to meet his gaze. In the sunlight, he had shed the coldness of a prosecutor. And his eyes even held a hint of genuine thirst for knowledge. I couldn't help but chat with him for a few more sentences. From Zhao Jis slender gold script to me fuss shu su tai. I had to admit that, setting aside the mess between us, he was indeed a good conversationalist. Knowledgeable and insightful. Such a conversation actually gave me a long-lost sense of satisfaction, as if I had met my match. Perhaps this brief harmony gave him a false impression. He was silent for a moment, and finally spoke, his voice tinged with suppressed pleading. Xiu Xiu. Give me another chance. Let's go home. Okay. The word home, coming from his mouth, was particularly jarring. I put down my brush, and the little bit of appreciation that had just arisen in my heart vanished in an instant. I wasn't angry. I just looked at him calmly. Come with me. I turned and pushed open the door of the storage room in the corner of the courtyard. A mixture of turpentine and ink rushed out. Inside, it was no longer a messy scene of farm tools. Sunlight streamed in from the skylight, illuminating a room full of easels and paintings. The walls, the floor, were covered with my works. There were crashing waves, ancient roads and the west wind, and the lights of thousands of homes in the city. Xia Huai stood stunned at the door, his eyes filled with shock. Xia Huai. I turned around, my voice clear and calm. This is the reason why I won't go back to that home. The Xie family is big, but there isn't a single room where I can set up my easel. The card you gave me can buy any expensive jewelry and clothes, but it can't buy me an afternoon where I can paint in peace. His lips moved, as if trying to explain something. I didn't give him the chance. Do you remember our wedding night? His body stiffened suddenly, and his face turned pale. I was scared. My voice was flat, as if telling someone else's story. I was trembling all over. But you just looked at me coldly and then went to the study and closed the door. Later, you went to another city to handle a case for 3 months. I wanted to go with you, to change the environment. You said, "What are you going to do? Pour tea and water for me." Those moments that once broke my heart now felt numb to even talk about. Just numb. Those are all in the past. I don't resent you now, and I don't hate you. I walked to the window, looking at the paintings filling the room. I've just figured it out. I'm too wild. I can't handle the wealth of a family like the Xies. It suffocates me. I pointed to a newly finished painting depicting a rainbow after a storm. See. My paintings are no longer just about that pear blossom tree. My world is already so broad. How could I possibly retreat back to that cage of a tiny world, where even breathing depended on reading people's faces? Xia Huai stood in the center of the studio, surrounded by my works and words. Like a lost child, the color had drained from his face, and for the first time, a look of embarrassment and helplessness appeared in those eyes that were once always calm and composed. The showdown in that studio seemed to finally break him completely. In the month that followed, Xia Huai never appeared again. Moss grew back on the stone steps at the entrance of the small courtyard. My life returned to an unprecedented calm. The drizzling rain of early summer fell tenderly all day long, washing the flowers and plants in the yard to an extraordinary green. The first no longer needed to paint those stormy waves, and instead, I began to paint rain hitting the banana leaves, and sparrows sheltering from the rain under the eaves. My heart was at peace, and the world under my brush became gentle. Qingzhu returned from outside with an umbrella, and casually mentioned while putting it away, "Sister Sue, I heard from driver Lin that the Xie family has been in chaos lately." And the old lady even fired Aunt Zhang from the kitchen. I was mixing viridian green, and only gave a faint in response. Those people and events were now a world away from me, unable to stir up even the slightest ripple. But this tranquility was ultimately short-lived. In the rain, a familiar black car stopped unexpectedly at the entrance of the yard. The door opened, and Xia Huai got out with a black umbrella. My heart sank. I was about to turn around and go back inside. But I saw him walk around to the other side and open the rear door. A figure staggered out of the car. The figure was very thin, draped in a large coat that seemed empty, supported by Xia Huai. He lowered his head and walked unsteadily towards the gate of the courtyard. My heart skipped a beat for no reason. Through the drizzling rain, I couldn't see his face clearly, but I felt a striking familiarity in his figure, until they got closer, and the man raised his head. With a bang, my mind went blank. Time seemed to stand still, and the world was left with only that pale, haggard face. So thin he was emaciated. It was my younger brother. Xiao Ma. Xiao Ma. My lips trembled, unable to utter a complete sound, and tears burst out instantly. I rushed into the rain like a madwoman, not caring about the mud under my feet, and hugged him tightly. He was too thin. Through the thin fabric, I could almost feel his distinct ribs. Sister. Xiao Mo's voice was as hoarse as if it had been rubbed with sandpaper. He hugged me back, his body trembling violently. I could feel warm liquid, drop by drop, falling on the nape of my neck. I pulled him away from Xia Huai and brought him inside. Grandma, who was reading the newspaper in the living room, heard the noise, looked up, and the smile on her face froze the moment she saw Xiao Mo. Xiao Mo. My good grandson. Xiao Mo looked at Grandma, his eyes instantly turning red. His legs went weak, and he knelt straight down, kowtowing heavily. Grandma. I'm sorry. The newspaper in Grandma's hand fluttered to the ground. She tried to get up, but her body swayed violently, and she fell straight backward. Grandma. Xiao Mo and I cried out in anguish at the same time. The entire afternoon, the small courtyard was shrouded in chaos and grief. After seeing the doctor off and settling the unconscious Grandma and the equally exhausted Xiao Mo, I finally had a moment to breathe. Walking out of the room, Xia Huai was still standing there. He didn't come inside, just stood under the eaves of the studio, quietly looking at the paintings in the room. The sound of rain pattered, making the surroundings particularly quiet. I walked up to him, composed myself, and then bowed deeply and solemnly to him. Thank you. This bow was for my brother who had suffered so much, and for our precarious family. He turned to the side, as if unwilling to accept my bow, his voice filled with suppressed anger. Chen Su. There's no need for such formalities between us. I straightened up and looked at him calmly. Mr. Xia, we are divorced. Debts must be clear. You deserve this thank you. I helped you, not so you could settle accounts with me. He finally couldn't help it. Took a step forward, his eyes surging with emotions I couldn't understand. I subconsciously took a step back, creating distance. This action seemed to completely sting him. He laughed self-deprecatingly, his voice full of fatigue and hoarseness. Did you think I was just trying to make up for what I owed you? He paused, his gaze piercing through the rain, looking into the unknown distance. Back then, when my father had a car accident, it was your father who risked his life to save him. The Xie family owes your Shen family a huge debt of gratitude. I turned and walked into the studio, taking out the bank card from the drawer. Inside was all the money I got from selling my first painting. I held the thin card and walked back to him. This is for you. I handed him the card. I know this is far from enough. Not enough to repay the favor of getting Xiao Mo's job transferred, and not enough to repay all the expenses of these 4 years. But this is a start. I will work hard to paint Work hard to earn money. And little by little, pay back everything I owe you. My voice was very calm, as if stating a simple fact. Xia Huai stared intently at the card, as if looking at a poisoned blade. He didn't take it. A dangerous silence filled the air. Even the sound of rain seemed to lessen. Suddenly, he laughed. A laugh tinged with desolation. Pay off. He abruptly looked up, his eyes bloodshot, the suppressed emotions finally erupting like a volcano. Chinsu, in your heart, is everything between us just an account that can be settled with money? His voice was hoarse. I helped you, not so you could settle accounts with me. I regret it. I regret being blind back then. Mistaking the pearl in my palm for an unsightly fisheye, he took a step forward, his scalding fingertips gripping my wrist, the bank card slipping from my fingers and falling onto the wet stone steps with a soft thud. I love you. The 3 words, spoken from his mouth, carried a desperate heat. My heart clenched painfully. His gaze was scorching, as if to burn through me. Su, let's start over. Okay. He softened his voice, with a hint of almost pleading tenderness. Well, move out of the old house, buy a new house with a yard, and build you a south-facing glass flower room as a studio. You can paint every day, until it's dark. If you want to go on a round-the-world trip to sketch, I'll go with you. If you want to see the aurora, well, go to Norway. If you want to paint the desert, well, go to the Sahara. We can bring the child back. The future he painted was like a brightly colored oil painting, each stroke precisely piercing the softest part of my heart. It was a dream so warm it was almost unreal. My heart pounded uncontrollably, and for a moment, I almost nodded. My gaze passed over his shoulder, and I saw the unfinished painting in the studio. In the painting, a bird was about to break free from layers of vines and fly into a vast, boundless sky. That scene was like a bucket of ice water poured over my head. All my agitation and soft-heartedness instantly cooled down. I gently freed my hand from his. Xia Huai. I raised my head, meeting his expectant gaze. What you're saying is beautiful, really beautiful, but status is always tied to responsibility. The identity of Mrs. Xia, for me, is a heavy shackle. My voice was clear and firm. I'm selfish. I don't want to learn flower arranging to please anyone anymore. I don't want to wear uncomfortable high heels to socialize anymore. I don't want to spend all my time on endless housework and social niceties anymore. I want to be a free bird. His face, with my words, gradually turned pale. The light in his eyes also dimmed inch by inch. I looked at him, word by word, and spoke the final answer. I don't want to. Time seemed to stand still. The last glimmer of light in his eyes was completely extinguished. He slowly released his hand. His shoulders slumped despondently, like a tree that had been drained of all its vitality. He said nothing more, just looked at me deeply, then turned and walked back into the rain. Step by step, that upright figure now seemed infinitely desolate. The black sedan glided away silently, disappearing at the end of the alley. I stood there, looking down at the rain-soaked bank card at my feet. After that rain, Xia Huai never appeared again. A month later, the last autumn rain fell, and my grandmother collapsed. She was calm, and I was calm. We both knew that the breath that sustained her was to wait for Xiaomo and me to settle down. Now, that breath had dissipated. Xia Huai came after all. He didn't mention any of the topics between us, but brought a famous old Chinese medicine doctor from the capital. After observation, auscultation, inquiry, and pulse-taking, the doctor told me that my grandmother had at most 2 months left. I thanked him softly and saw them out. After that, Xia Huai came every day, bringing various warming and nourishing medicinal materials. Like a silent shadow, he sat under the veranda, not entering the house to disturb, only silently stepping forward when I needed a hand. I refused, but he just shook his head and continued to guard silently. So I let him be. In November, the last autumn rain pattered against the window lattices. My grandmother, who had been in a coma, miraculously woke up that afternoon. Her spirits frighteningly good. She even sat up by herself, put on her coat, and her cloudy eyes showed clarity. Xiao Huai, come here. My grandmother's voice was soft, but very clear. Xia Huai quickly walked into the house, sat down on the low stool next to my bed, and leaned closer. Grandma. His voice was a little hoarse. My grandmother's withered hand trembled and stroked the back of his hand, gently patting it. Good child. Thank you for your hard work these days. Grandma knows. You are a good child. Grandma's gaze passed over him and fell on me, her eyes full of pity and guilt. Back then, if it wasn't for my old bones being uncooperative, I wouldn't have burdened Su. This child has been heavy-hearted since she was little. She exchanged her paintings, her future, for a few more years of my life. Every word of my grandmother's was like a dull knife, slowly cutting into Xia Huai's heart. His tall body stooped down little by little, his head lowered more and more, and his shoulders began to tremble uncontrollably. Grandma. My grandmother's gaze returned to his face, her gaze kind and insightful, as if she could see through everything. I know about you two. You two are destined to be apart. The hurdle in her heart can't be crossed. The guilt in your heart can't be cleared. It's like tangled threads. If you can't untie them, forcing it will only break them. Let her go, and let yourself go. My grandmother's voice was like the continuous autumn rain outside the window, gentle, but with a bone-chilling coolness, washing away all unrealistic thoughts. Xia Huai's head was completely buried in his knees. I saw a drop of hot liquid seeping out from between his fingers, falling on the old wooden floor, leaving a small dark stain. Suppressed. Silent sobs filled the small room. Grandma stopped looking at him and turned to gaze out the window. The leaves of the pear tree in the yard had all fallen, leaving only bare branches swaying slightly in the wind and rain. What a pity! Grandma let out a soft sigh. I won't be around to see it bloom next spring. Grandma's funeral was kept simple, with only a few close neighbors invited. The dust settled. I packed the last suitcase, and Xiao Emo silently carried it to the door. Before heading to the airport, I arranged to meet Xia Huai at a coffee shop in the city center for one last time. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window. He was wearing a dark blue suit, the first and only one I had personally tailored for him. The fabric was crisp, the cut perfect, accentuating his broad shoulders and long legs. But his once spirited face was now filled with undisguised weariness. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. He picked up the coffee pot beside him and poured me a cup, the steam swirling, his movements as practiced as if we were still husband and wife. Where are you going? He spoke first, his voice a little dry. Chengdu. I met his gaze frankly. My comic studio is there, all set up. The knuckles of his hand holding the coffee pot turned slightly white. A cartoonist. He murmured to himself, as if mocking something. I was ridiculous back then, thinking it was just some childish scribbles. I was so wrong. I picked up the coffee cup, feeling the warmth in my palm, and looked at him calmly. Xia Huai. It's all in the past. His shoulders slumped suddenly, and the light in his eyes dimmed completely. I continued. Between us, it was never a question of who was right and who was wrong, just that we weren't suited for each other. What you wanted was a wife who could manage everything for you, leaving you with no worries. And all I ever wanted was a paintbrush and a desk where I could draw in peace. He was silent for a long time, so long that the coffee had lost all its steam. No matter how gilded the cage, it can't hold a bird that wants to fly high. He finally looked up. His eyes red-rimmed, but he forced a relieved smile. He raised his coffee cup to me. Chin-su, I'll take this cup as a toast, wishing you, from now on, boundless skies and vast seas. A soaring flight of 10,000 miles. I also raised my cup and lightly tapped it against his in the air. And I wish you, all your desires fulfilled. A life of smooth sailing. I finished the last sip of coffee in my cup, stood up, and picked up my coat. Chow Emo was already waiting at the door. I didn't look back. Stepping out of the cafe, the cold wind of early winter rushed towards me, carrying a crisp freshness. Yet I felt a sense of ease throughout my body. Looking up at the gray sky, a flock of migratory birds flew in neat formation, heading steadfastly south. And